So question number 14 from the final exam review for Math 13-14. It says solve the rational inequality and graph the solution set on a real number line. So we're given the inequality negative x plus 1 over x minus 7 is greater than or equal to 0. So the first thing we want to do is identify our zeros of the numerator and the zeros of the denominator. So we're looking at negative x plus 1 equals 0, which now we have negative x is equal to negative 1, so x is equal to 1. So that is your first zero of the numerator. And we also need to find the zero of the denominator. So we have x minus 7 is equal to 0, so x is equal to 7. Okay, so these are the zeros of this inequality. X equals 1 from the numerator and x equals 7 from the denominator. And so what we do is use the zeros to divide the number line up into intervals. So I identify my zeros with flags. So the first flag we have is 1. And then the second flag we will have will be your 7. So if you notice, this is now dividing the number line up into intervals. Our first interval is from negative infinity to 1. Okay, so now I'm stopping here because we have to decide, will this 1 have a bracket or a parentheses? Based on the definition of greater than or equal to, it should be a bracket. But because we have a rational inequality, will including the 1 make the denominator 0? And the answer is no. So we can use the definition of what's given to us, which is a bracket on 1. Okay, so then we go to the second interval. We have 1, and now we're going to 7. So before we put a bracket, we need to see if including 7 will make the denominator 0. And the answer to that is yes, so that means we cannot include 0. So that means you will use your parenthesis around the 7. And now our third interval is from 7 to infinity. And of course, you still have the parenthesis around 7, and there's always a parenthesis around negative infinity, infinity. All right, so now what do? We will pick a test number in each interval to determine if the sign will be positive or negative. So let's pick 0 in the first as our test. Let's pick 2, and then let's pick 10. It doesn't matter what number you pick within the interval, as long as it's within the interval. So you take your 0, and we will plug in to our, let's change the inequality to an equation. Okay, so when we plug in, do we get a positive answer or do we get a negative answer? So we have what? 0 plus 1 over 0 minus 7. So do we end up with a positive answer or a negative answer? In this case, we have 1 over negative 7, so the answer is negative. Okay, so now we take our 2 and we plug in as well. So we will have negative 2 plus 1 over 2 minus 7. So we have a negative 1 over a negative 5. So what is a negative divided by a negative? It is a positive. All right, and then we'll use our last test number, 10. So we have negative 10 plus 1 over 10 minus 7. So negative 10 plus 1 is negative 9, and 10 minus 7 is 3. So we have a negative over a positive, which gives us a negative. Okay. So now, based on the inequality, what kind of answers are we looking for? So what kind of answers are greater than or equal to 0? Those would be positive. So the solution to this inequality, written in interval notation, would be 1 to 7. 1 with a bracket and 7 with your parenthesis.